In this video, we're going to discuss how to provide evidence from your sources, specifically quotes, numbers, and examples. And a lot of times people are confused about what it means to provide evidence in your essay, especially when you're working with research sources. So I want to try to make that as simple and concrete as I can. So when people are talking about a piece of evidence, what they're talking about is a quote, a number, or a specific example. So you need to have one of those three or a combination of them in order to have evidence for a claim: a quote, a number, or a specific example. If you don't have one of those three things, then you probably don't have any evidence for your claim, at least not that you're showing in your essay. So let's take a look at how to use each of those types of evidence. So first, a quote. So here I'm really talking about a quote from an expert. You could have a quote for a number or a specific example too. Quotes generally, though, are used to bring in analysis from an expert. So when you're first quoting that expert, the first time in the essay, make sure to give that expert's credentials in the signal phrase. So you might say, according to Jane Davis, comma, a sociology professor at Harvard, comma, and then give the quote. After that, you don't need to keep repeating the credentials. You just give it once, the first time, that's it. A very important thing about quoting an expert is you don't just want to quote that expert's conclusions. That's a mistake a lot of people make. They sort of make a claim and they just try to find a quote from the article that says, hey, this expert agrees with me. And that's not really evidence. Evidence would be quoting the explanation that the expert gives to support that claim, right? So you're really looking for that expert's analysis or evidence that that expert is providing to show that your claim is correct. The point is not just to show that someone agrees with you. That doesn't really matter that much. What matters is to show that an expert has some kind of evidence, analysis, explanation that shows that your claim is correct. So that's an important part about quoting an expert. You want to quote the analysis on which their conclusion is blamed, not just their conclusion. You could also use a number. Numbers are great. They're very specific, very concrete. Try to provide an actual number, not just broad quantities like more or less. And typically, in an essay for a college course, you would provide numbers in the form of either statistics or percentages. So that's what you're looking for, statistics or percentages, or both. And then finally, a specific example, which we've talked about in other videos, and this means a particular person, an actual event, or a tangible thing. So this could be a person with a name, an official group with a name, or an unnamed person that you have observed and you describe as an individual, not just a type of person. Don't just mention a person, though, without talking about something specific that they did, right? Sometimes people will say, well, an example is this person, period, and they never say anything about, well, what did they do that illustrates your claim? Actual events, so that should be a specific incident at a specific time and place. You want to set the scene and tell the story of that event briefly. You don't want just a general event or recurring or repeated events, because then you never get anything specific. And tangible things, that could be a particular object or a particular media creation, a TV show, film, song, book, website. If you do list that as an example, you need to give the name and usually just say something about it, like what happened there. Again, with both people and things, you also need to sort of bring in the event piece too, what happened. All right, in addition to having specific evidence, you also want evidence that's relevant to your claim, and that means providing evidence that supports the specific claim or claims that you make. It also means supporting every claim in an essay you make, not just some. And it also doesn't mean only providing the evidence that's easiest for you to find, especially if that doesn't really support your key claims. One of the biggest problems I see with people providing evidence as an essay is they'll provide a lot of evidence for something that's maybe not that important, but it was something they could find, and the really key claims that their argument is based on don't have any evidence from sources. And that's just not very persuasive. So you have to make sure you're finding evidence for your key claims, not just putting in evidence that you can find. It doesn't really matter how much evidence you have or anything like that. A lot of people think, well, I've got a lot of quotes here, so that looks pretty good. But if you don't have evidence for the specific claims you make and for the really important ones, then it doesn't matter how much you have. You need to have evidence that is relevant to your key claims. Okay. So in addition to relevance, of course, when we're talking about specific evidence, we mean a quote, a number, or a specific example. So when you're looking at your own essay and trying to decide, do I have evidence for a claim, ask yourself, well, do I have a quote here? Is there a number here? Is there a specific example here? If there's none of that, then you probably don't have any evidence, and you need to go back and find one of those things from one of your sources. All right, and in the next video, we'll take a look at some examples of good and bad examples of providing evidence from sources.